We are now going to move on to Proposition 25. Proposition 25, excuse me, is actually dealing with the two-thirds majority that it now takes to pass a budget in the state of California, being only one of 3 states that allows that. This one is an attempt to repeal the two-thirds requirement. Tim, help me out here. Explain what this actually does.
Okay, well, you know, you pretty much said it in a nutshell. Currently, California requires a two-thirds vote on anything that has to do with spending or taxes. Any appropriation, any act by the legislature which appropriates money from the state treasury to any entity requires a two-thirds vote of the legislature. And it has clearly been one of the reasons why it's so difficult to pass the budget in California. As we all know, the budget is on time a couple times a decade in recent past. As we speak right now, towards the end of September, this year's state budget is already broken a record for its tardiness and with no particular end in sight. So this says, okay, let's let the legislature, by a majority, pass the budget and be accountable for it. Now, how much good that will do if you can't adjust the revenues upward you still require a two-thirds vote for tax increases, which under Proposition 25 you would require a two-thirds vote for tax increases. Obviously, whoever puts together a budget that gets a majority can't rely on tax increases unless they can also get a supermajority to approve those. But at least it would make that actual budget document a majority document as opposed to a consensus document.
Well, let's go through some of these arguments because there are compelling arguments probably on both sides. And the supporters of Prop 25, as you say, indicate that this is what leads to gridlock, and that by eliminating that and just going back to what America usually focuses on, majority rule, it would be sensible. To some, I think majority rule makes sense, but the no on Proposition 25 people have a whole different view. Share that.
They believe that this would inevitably start to erode that two-thirds tax protection. There's nothing specifically in the language that does that, but one could imagine that as part of putting together a budget, there might be cuts in there that would be harmful to a particular region of the state disproportionately, and those who represent that region of the state might be more amenable to talking about a tax increase if the option was to see these programs in these areas reduced. So it clearly would give some leverage where none really exists now to a simple majority of the legislature to try to persuade their colleagues to increase revenues.
One of the arguments that the no on 25 people have said over the years is that without the two-thirds, the minority would sort of be pushed aside. Nobody in the majority would ever care to work with them, type of thing. But because of the two-thirds, there is this attempt to try and work across the aisle. Does that really hold up?
The two-thirds vote makes whatever the minority party is in the legislature at any given time. Right now, and for the recent past, it's been the Republicans. You know, if you're the minority, you're the minority. You get outvoted. The people held elections. They elected this party. The majority of them did, and that's pretty much going back to the Magna Carta, the way democratic institutions have functioned. So the two-thirds vote does give the minority party more say, and historically in California, that's kind of worked in the past decades. We've become more polarized politically, and you don't see that kind of openness to compromise that maybe you once saw. It also used to be that the two-thirds vote only applied if the state budget were going to increase by more than 5% in a given year. But that was taken out in the 60s. So it's, yes, the minority would lose some of its power and influence, but on the other side is, do we really want minority rule, which is proponents of this argue is what the current system has given us, minority rule as opposed to majority rule.
Are there moneyed interests that are coming in to support one or the other side on this one?
Yeah, it's kind of it's a classic Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal alliance. The public employee groups, the education advocates are lined up on the yes side. The conservatives, the anti-tax people are lined up on the other side. They just don't trust that by giving a majority of the legislature an ability to pass a budget, that wouldn't increase pressures to increase taxes.
Let's go ahead and talk about Proposition 26, which is another one that deals with things that happen in Sacramento. Please explain that one to our viewers.
Oh yeah, well this dates back to a court decision called the Sinclair Paint decision. And under California law, taxes, as we just talked about, and some of these other ballot measures, require a 2/3 vote in California. But a fee requires a majority vote. So then what's the difference between a fee and a tax? Well, the legislature in this Sinclair Paint decision just said, hey, we've got a problem with lead and cleaning up lead and the toxic lead in the environment. And well, who puts a lot of this lead into the environment? Well, lead-based paint. So we're going to put a fee on paint manufacturers, and from that money, we will use that fee to address the lead issue. And the Sinclair Paint Company said, well, wait a minute, that's not a direct thing. I mean, we're paying this fee, but we're not the direct beneficiaries, as opposed to where if you get a fee from your city for garbage service, well, you pay the fee, the truck comes to your house, picks it up, takes it. I mean, clearly there's a direct relationship. But the court held, no, that's a reasonable nexus between who pays the fee and the public benefit. And so this would say no. This would undo that Sinclair Paint decision and say, if there is a fee where there isn't that sort of direct nexus, then it would take a 2/3 vote.
So this will make it easier or harder for the legislature to balance the budget, for example?
Well, it would make it harder for them to implement fees. And the opponents call this the Polluter Protection Act, because most of the fees that would be affected are exactly what we were just talking about. The fees that are levied on industries for, like the oil companies pay an oil recycling fee that helps us with fund programs that keep old discarded oil from going into the sewer system and the drainage systems and down to the ocean and the waterways. The hazardous material fees, fees on alcohol retailers to deal with some. This is a city issue. Would deal with city alcohol issues. So this would make it more difficult to implement those sorts of fees. It would take a 2/3 vote.
Now, is that statewide?
That would apply to both the state government and local government.
So even a local government that said we want to put a fee out for something that was somewhat broad-based would have to be able to go to the voters to get 2/3? You stumped me. We've been doing this a long time. I don't know whether they have to go to the voters or whether it would take a 2/3. I think they would. I'm not sure whether it would be a 2/3 vote of the voters or a 2/3 vote of the governing agency. Well, it does sound like it will make it a challenge if you want to have fees. So really, if you're I don't want to be pejorative and say polluter, but if you're an industry affected by a fee, you really just have to lobby slightly over 1/3 of the legislature to vote against it, and you're home free.
And one interesting twist in this is that also any taxes that are increased not for the purposes of raising revenue would also require 2/3, and that would really affect a major change in the way the state handles gasoline taxes, which was implemented last year, which was that they eliminated the sales tax and made it all just like highway users tax, and so that would generate a $1 billion question, yeah.
Well, that concludes our review of Proposition 26.